I'm gonna be entirely honest with you guys, I didn't see myself making a video this week. I've been on holiday and I had a video in the works already, so I was just kind of relaxing and taking it slow. But then I saw one of the most god-awful videos on this platform, hands down and without question, and I just knew I had to talk about it. I've had a run-in with SunnyV2's worst content in the past when I responded to his video about Dream's face reveal, a video that came off as incredibly terminally online, where he presented this idea that Dream's face reveal, which he obviously did for his own enrichment, would kill his entire YouTube channel, based on no reasonable logic, just because people were at that point in time making memes about Dream's appearance. But honestly, I think every other video SunnyV2 has made on his entire channel pale in comparison to this one video where he insinuates that a trans person should not transition because they may kill the MrBeast channel by simply being trans. Which should hopefully, if you're a normal, decent human being, sound like the most ridiculous thing you have ever heard. But to most of his audience, apparently not, because this video is overwhelmingly well received. But I said all of that without telling you to subscribe to the channel. Sorry, that one just slipped out. I've said all of that without actually showing you the video and proving it's as bad as I say, so let's actually give it a look.
The Chris Tyson situation could become a complete disaster for MrBeast's brand. However, it may also provide some unique benefits. So let's begin by going over the drama before explaining exactly how this will impact the MrBeast channel.
Immediately from the cold open to this video, you notice it has more holes in it than the fucking Titanic. This video has some glaring flaws. Namely, that the video starts by presenting the idea that Chris's transition could become a complete disaster for MrBeast's brand. And I don't mean to be the person to point out the obvious here, but someone's personal transition in their life, changing their own body that they have a right to choose whatever they do with, does not, in any capacity, affect anyone else. Chris isn't going to change as a person and suddenly become a new controversial face on the platform by becoming more gender non-conforming, and I find it bloody hilarious that SunnyV2 thinks that's the case. Not to mention that making someone's personal decision about MrBeast's brand in the first place is really weird. This isn't about MrBeast's brand. It's about what's best for them. They said in plain English in a screenshot Sunny is going to read in this video that these treatments saved their life. That's a good thing.
Mid-2022, fans began to notice that Chris Tyson was changing. In the early days, he represented the quintessential southern gun and truck-loving dude. Yet beginning in March 2022, Chris began to display increasingly feminine traits, making tweets such as, "I finally got my nails done at a nail tech." Additionally, Chris would highlight that his facial appearance had changed significantly since the start of the pandemic, which accompanied another post reading, "Okay, so in 4 different customs, I had to prove I was myself because I, quote, look nothing like my passport pic, so much that I'm considering updating my passport. Do you see any resemblance?" Prompting replies such as, "You went from man to boy." Chris responded by stating, "Nah, to be honest, I just really started taking my mental health seriously and eating better." Yet his Twitter photos kept insinuating that Chris was becoming more feminine, with this same kind of look showing up in his MrBeast appearances. For example, on the 6th of January 2023, Beast Reacts uploaded a video titled "I strapped a GoPro to a fish," in which Chris dressed in a way that prompted comments such as, "Chris has been adopting more and more traits that remind me of my grandmother." Okay, so some people just gonna ignore Chris's nails? Chris had to have lost a bet. The look is getting wild. The response to the video then prompted countless viral TikToks, such as this one with 700,000 likes, stating, "How did Chris go from this to this?" While others even made the claim that Carl had turned him gay. Now, this was pretty ridiculous as Carl isn't even that feminine, and Chris had come out as bisexual years before he and Carl had even met.
Holy sh*! How did SunnyV2 get this close to making a good point for once, and then suddenly send a freight train my direction to blow all of my hopes and expectations out of the water? The point he's making here is that some people online have been saying that Carl Jacobs turned Chris gay. He then argues that that's not the case, because Carl Jacobs isn't even that effeminate. Not that you can't turn someone gay. Surely it's obvious that you can't turn someone gay, and that should have been a home run for SunnyV2. One of the easiest W's he could have taken, and he would have got the opportunity to own the people he wanted to talk about while looking better and, I guess, padding his video more, if that's what he was aiming to do with this. But instead, he somehow pulls off batting for the wrong team, striking out his pitcher and sending them home in an ambulance with brain damage.
True catalyst for Chris Tyson's feminization instead seemed to have come from his marriage. In January 2022, Chris would post a photo with his wife to his Instagram, yet after this, the family photo stopped altogether. Fans also noticed that he'd removed his wedding ring, with the ring's absence correlating perfectly with the very first post in which he'd painted his nails. Chris confirmed the split in a post from March 2023 reading, "For a little over a year now, me and Katie have been separated," with this also confirming that Chris's transformation began as soon as his marriage came to an end. Chris went from lighting campfires and raising a family with his beautiful wife to now trying to be a wife with his man buns and long nails.
I've decided to spare you guys the long drawn-out rant about how invasive this is into Chris's personal life. I think it goes without saying how obsessive and weirdly uncomfortable this is towards Chris, in favor of presenting the simple notion that this is Chris's own choice. This isn't the audience's choice, this isn't SunnyV2's choice, and this isn't my choice. Who cares what this does to Chris's personal relationships with other people? This is Chris's life. This is Chris's choices. If this saved Chris's life, more power to them. This isn't your place to pry into it or decide on.
The criticism continued to pile. Chris announced that he'd be taking a break from social media. And while there was a possibility that Chris would make efforts to return to his former self, he'd rather do the opposite and double down on his feminine image, showing up to the Kids' Choice Awards looking like this, before making the announcement that he'd been doing HRT for approximately 2 months, which according to a quick Google search is the medical process for changing genders.
It's around this point in the video where I start getting incredibly concerned. When Sunny said, quote, "While there was a possibility that Chris would make efforts to return to their former self, they'd rather do the opposite and double down on their feminine image." What did Sunny mean? Because to me, this seems like a very obvious statement from Sunny that Sunny believes Chris should have detransitioned and buckled under the backlash of straight-up harassment. How does Sunny join the war on transphobia on the side of transphobia? Am I missing something here? Am I misinterpreting him? I'd like to believe so, but unfortunately that doesn't seem like it's the case.
I would expand on this by stating, informed consent HRT saved my and many others' lives. The hurdles GNC people have to jump through to get life-saving gender-affirming healthcare in a first world country is wild to me. Just let people make informed decisions about their own bodies, which received a positive response from both Carl and MrBeast, who wrote, "Got you, I did one more heart than Carl because I'm a better friend." While his co-workers expressed positivity, others weren't so welcoming. There goes a father figure the kid won't ever be able to look up to. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Weak man times. Chris responded to this comment by stating, "This is just more dog whistling that somehow trans and GNC folks aren't safe around kids. Tucker begs for me to come back when I leave for like 2 days to film. He is so loved and happy. Kids aren't born with hate, it's taught by people like you, and my child will only know love. I know I'm going to be a great parent, and so is every other person who puts the love of their child before everything. I made this decision because I wanted to show up as my best and happiest self for him. In a way, this was for Tucker." Chris's response received some positivity such as, "I'm convinced you're an amazing father. Tucker is lucky to have you and also lucky to have all of those who surround and support you in his life, as well as I adore that, I'm glad you made that decision. It's so much easier to be a parental figure when you're not struggling with dysphoria, yet he'd also receive an equal amount of backlash. You ripped apart your family and took a father figure away from your son just so you could paint your nails and act zesty. Pathetic. He will get torn apart at school, won't want to have friends around his house. A life full of difference and being alone. Must have missed the point in that tweet. How's this for him when you're depriving him of a father figure?" Although Chris wasn't altered by these comments, as he'd once again reiterate his certainty in a new post reading, "It's never too late to start being yourself," which received praise from MrBeast as well as Nolan and Carl. However, these comments also added extra fuel to the fire. In a few years, look back at this thread and remember they were never your friends. Only yes men cowards. Hope you come out of this safe. MrBeast responded to this with a simple opinion irrelevant ratio, to which the original commenter would state, "I have 30 followers, so go ahead and ratio me. I'll still rest easy knowing that I'm not a coward who idly sits by watching my friend ruin his own life." In some ways, it was nice to see the boys standing up for Chris on Twitter. However, the situation situation has already begun to change the dynamic within the videos. For example, in a recent livestream titled Opening 1,000 Mystery Art Boxes, Chris would once again dress in quite a feminine way, and while everybody participated as usual, the energy and vibe didn't feel nearly as smooth as it normally does.
This is one of the funniest points in this video because suddenly Sunny acts like a body language expert who knows exactly what each different gesture means, and as if he's closely intertwined with this friend group and knows what each of them feel and think about this entire situation. He doesn't. So what follows is a few cherry-picked examples of awkward, in quotes, examples from this live stream that supposedly prove that everyone in this situation doesn't like that this is occurring. But honestly, if you aren't watching these clips trying to nitpick every aspect of slight body language and going in with the interpretation that something's supposed to be bad here, it seems pretty normal to me. They just seem like pretty regular moments in a live stream, and I don't really think people are being very honest when they're looking at these clips and are representing them very uncharitably.
It felt as though there was an unaddressed elephant in the room, and therefore everybody was in their head, as opposed to being in the present moment enjoying each other's company. Maybe everybody was simply too busy opening packages, but Chris did make these bizarre jokes about Jimmy being female, making him incredibly uncomfortable.
Oh my god, Jimmy, look, they drew you. Jimmy, they drew you so well. It looks just like you.
Oh, yes.
Oh my god, it's Jimmy.
How did fan art? This is what we were looking for. Be brave, be honest, be kind, MrBeast. That is my tagline.
Becoming even weirder when each member started to pay each other compliments.
Hey, nice shirt. Thanks, dude. Nice shirt.
Hey, nice shirt.
Thanks, dude. Nice shirt.
Thanks. Nice shirt.
Nice shoes.
For the most part, the live stream was devoid of awkward moments. However, it would act as fodder for another 100 million views worth of drama and criticism.
Hey, whoa. Did you notice that? Sunny quickly, slyly slips in that, for the most part, the rest of the live stream was devoid of awkward moments or drama, and then moves on just as quickly. I think that's very important and telling because Sunny acknowledges that this really isn't as big of an issue as people are making it, but he slips that in as an extra point on the top instead of making that the point of his video because his bias is clearly showing here. You can see that Sunny is painting a certain narrative here.
Chris likely believes that people will slowly adapt to his new appearance over time, but is this really going to happen? Well, maybe. It's difficult to say as the situation is fairly unique, especially when considering Chris's reputation and influence. However, if Chris continues to transition, would it be unreasonable to say that he could jeopardize some of the personality traits which made him a successful member in the first place?
This argument can be surmised to, should you ever change as a content creator or should you remain the exact same, never improving yourself for your own benefit or for your audience's benefit for the rest of your life? I think the answer is, people can change and grow. And I don't think Chris needs to remain the same person as they were. But also, that Chris isn't going to suddenly disappear. They're still the same person at the end of the day. They're just expressing themselves more openly now. And if that scares you or makes you uncomfortable, that says more about you than it does about them or the content itself. None of the content is going to suddenly change. Though, if you were watching a MrBeast video in the first place, you probably didn't really care about that much anyway.
Perhaps the opposite will happen, and he'll instead pick up new personality traits that better resonate with the current MrBeast audience. This was put forward in many comments supportive of Chris, who implied that there'll be millions of queer kids who look up to him, although this doesn't necessarily mean that it'll add any value to the videos. MrBeast has likely cultivated a massive LGBT audience, all of whom are already watching anyway, and if we've learned anything from Hollywood in recent years, it's that adding over-the-top LGBT characters for the sake of relatability rarely works as intended and is often nothing more than a distraction from the premise of the movie or video.
I get that SunnyV2 makes cookie-cutter copy-paste bland videos that lack substance and probably couldn't make an argument to save his life, but I thought he'd at least be able to make a point here. Not just fail on all accounts, but I guess I overestimated him. This point has to be one of the worst in this entire video. He starts it by focusing solely on the benefits this will give to the MrBeast brand, when this shouldn't be about that in the first place, and then continues on to say that people aren't going to like this because, and I quote, "If we've learned anything from Hollywood in the last few years, it's that inserting over-the-top LGBT characters for the sake of relatability rarely works as intended and is often nothing more than a distraction from the premise of the movie or video." But this once again falls on its face because Chris isn't a fictional character. Chris is a real person. This is a life decision they are making, And a lot of people are inspired by the confidence it takes to be open about that, instead of just being an insertion to make a product woke, as some people would argue. But even then, I think, once again, Sunny's bias is showing because there are a lot of good LGBTQ characters in media that Sunny is ignoring to make this point. Sure, you could probably highlight some examples of characters that were inserted for woke points, as these people argue. But that doesn't erase the fact there's a lot of very good LGBTQ characters and BIPOC characters that give people in those groups a lot of validation and inspire them to be more open about themselves. Just one great example of a well-handled BIPOC character being Miles Morales, a character that was incredibly refreshing for a lot of black people who wanted to see themselves expressed on screen in an incredibly passionate way. Yet all of these anti-woke people who are just terrified, I guess, of the word woke, say that he's not even Spider-Man because, well, it's obvious why. They'll say, oh, it's because he's not Peter Parker, but none of the other Spider-Men are Peter Parker either. It's obvious that it's just because Miles is black, and they don't like seeing a black character represented on screen. It's just discrimination. These people are scared of anyone who isn't like them. So they call it woke, and then they say they won't support it in any capacity. How are grown men saying this? Let people do whatever they want with their life and stop judging people based on aspects of themselves they can't change.
On top of this, it can be uncomfortable and unrelatable for the silent majority, although as we have seen, a situation like Chris's does have the potential to create an otherworldly amount of discussion, which could be seen as a benefit for the MrBeast brand.
Drama is good for growth, 100%. That would be an easy way to up my
So you're
if
a
I got it,
Keemstar?
bro.
The problem is this type of situation is probably the last thing that MrBeast wants to attract, as he's forced to agree with Chris's position, as he has no way of manipulating the situation without being painted as the bad guy. It's a lose-lose situation for MrBeast. I think Jimmy is in an inescapable situation. If he kicks out Chris, cancelled. If he don't, his channel will die for real. An inescapable situation is a pretty good way of describing the drama, which is also why it deserves the harsh label of being a nightmare. Jimmy has no option but to publicly express acceptance of Chris's transition, as silence or even worse, disapproval would come with obvious severe repercussions.
Chris and Jimmy are friends. This isn't about the views or the viewers or the content. This is about MrBeast respecting his friend and choosing to stick up for them. He didn't have to. He could have remained silent. MrBeast has likely known about this for years, known about how Chris was feeling, and if he really wanted to, he would have cut out Chris way before this ever got to the public. It's obvious he's been supporting his friend, and there are so many other ways he could have approached this if he didn't want Chris to be in his future content. He chose to put them there because he supports them. Stop presuming you know who MrBeast is and how he feels because you watch his videos. You parasocial freaks are trying to read into all of their feelings based on nothing but seeing the segments of them in videos. This is not normal behavior for any functioning adult.
In accepting Chris's transition, Jimmy implies that this will be the new normal within the content, thus annoying a different group of people, many of whom will never express their true feelings and may rather simply click on fewer MrBeast videos. If this is the case, Jimmy has no option but to accept this fate, as removing Chris from the videos in any kind of way could create an even more severe media firestorm. The only clean solution, should things go south, might be for Chris to resign himself, and even then rumors and bad press will be unavoidable. Whether it be arrogance or ignorance, Chris seems oblivious to how this whole thing might impact Jimmy, forgetting that he achieved his current level of success by avoiding this exact type of drama.
Sunny is literally making Chris's transition about Jimmy, how this will affect him, how this will fuck over his channel, how this will cause him problems. This isn't about MrBeast. This is about Chris and what they're doing with their own body and the choices they are making in their own life. This isn't about MrBeast. How MrBeast feels about it doesn't even matter. Chris can do whatever they want with their body, and they don't owe it to MrBeast to not get life-saving surgery because maybe MrBeast loses a few viewers. I get that Sunny likes to believe that people who hate trans people and cannot stand their existence are somehow the silent majority, but that isn't the case. And once again, it's just Sunny's bias showing. With that being said though, we've reached the end of this abomination, and I hope you can understand why I have so much of an issue with it. This video is incredibly biased, lacks any kind of actual evidence to support its points, is incredibly invasive, doesn't have any kind of argument to stand on, and once again shows all Sunny cares about his views and not actually being a genuine person. which is especially highlighted when Sunny said that Chris should detransition, buckling to the haters, because it would benefit MrBeast's channel. I still cannot believe he thought this was a good video to upload. And this is where I was going to end this video, until MrBeast released a response to one of my content creator friends in the form of a comment saying, yeah, this is getting absurd. Chris isn't my nightmare, he's my friend and things are fine. All this transphobia is starting to piss me off. Sunny's entire video has been off the mark. He tried to raise issue with how MrBeast was acting, tried to insinuate MrBeast was against all of this, etc. And I have to give MrBeast credit for coming out publicly and standing with trans people and his trans friend during all of this public backlash, and in a time when trans people are so negatively regarded in the public sphere. It really is a meaningful step forward for MrBeast, and I really value that he commented on the SunnyV2 video. Respectfully, I think Sunny should go f*** himself, and I'll leave it there. With that being said, if you're new to the channel, I'd appreciate a subscription. You can check out my Patreon if you'd like to support me financially. My other social media are in the description if you'd like to check me out over there. I'm always available to contact on any of my platforms. We do art challenges in my Discord, etc. And I'll see all you little gay people in my computer again when I next upload.
I'm a certified introverted caveman. I would go outside, but I hate celebrations. If you have to lie, just miss me with that fake shit. If you have to lie, just miss me with that fake shit. Walk around like I get bodies in the basement. Used to follow God, don't know where my faith went. If you have to lie, just miss me with that fake shit. If we have to die, just miss me with that fake shit.
Call me in the morning, call me in the morning. I'ma need a warning. If it's that important, we can get it sorted, we can get it sorted. Running out of storage, didn't get the memo. Is it